the Rams offense or the Seahawks defense?
Well, first of all, let me say, of the units on these teams, I trust Sam Darnold the least. All right, of all of them. All right, so I will throw that out there. These two is close. Look, I know the Rams in that Week 15 game had 500-plus yards, 37 points. They ate up this Seattle defense. But my answer is still Seattle.
Wow.
When they played in the first matchup this season, they gave Stafford some trouble. And he played fine, but they didn't light him up. He had 130 yards passing and like an 80-something passer rating. So they held him in check. But this defense, I mean, they stopped the run. They're top 10 against the run. They're top 10 against the pass. They're number one in points allowed. Mm-hmm. So I think that and on top of them having played great, maybe I'm skewed because of what they've done to the 49ers. We've seen them play the 49ers so often recently, and they've held them down. But also, Nick, is that the Rams their offense and Stafford aren't really playing great in this postseason. Stafford's got, I think, 3 touchdowns, a pick, 80 passer rating in the playoffs, in the 2 games, total. So he hasn't really been great. And these are 2 defenses, Carolina and Chicago, that are in the bottom half of the league defensively, and he still hasn't lit them up. And so of the 2 units, I'm not saying the Rams can't win, but of these 2 who I trust most, I think Seattle, and their defense has been playing better than the Rams offense has lately.
So I evidently think Stafford played a lot better against Carolina than you do. Against Carolina, on the road, he had 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. He threw 1 pick. I thought the Bears game, he didn't play great, and then they made the plays at the end. I think he had 0 touchdowns, 0 turnovers in the Bears game. But 300 yards, 3 touchdowns in the first playoff game. And my answer is the Rams offense because of Stafford. Because in each game this year, for me, it felt like against the Seahawks, Stafford played the type of game he needed to play given what Seattle was doing. Now, I know it's weird because...
You're talking about the second matchup?
In both games. So the first matchup, Sam Darnold is turning the ball over left and right. We can show you Stafford's numbers. And it seemed like Stafford's like, okay, don't turn the ball over and we're going to be fine. And again, that's not a good game. I'm not acting like that's a good game. But can he have a big game against Seattle? Well, the next game, when Seattle's moving the ball, he had 450 yards and 3 touchdowns. So it's weird because there's such disparate games, Brew. Yeah. But his numbers this year against the Seahawks are kind of just his numbers for the year. Yards per attempt, about the same. Yards per game, actually higher. Completion percentage, considerably lower, but team points per game, damn near identical. Passer rating, very, very close to identical. And so I don't think Seattle is going to be able to entirely hold the Rams in check.
Of course, because the Los Angeles Rams have not entirely demonstrated that potential consistently. They displayed glimpses of it, and the Seattle Seahawks haven't fully exhibited that either. They showed flashes in the initial matchup. I don't believe it was solely because Matthew Stafford decided, I'm just going to protect the football. No. The Seahawks defensive unit genuinely elevated its performance during that first contest. In the second encounter, Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay were connecting with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. They were consistently wide open throughout that entire game. That Seattle defense was not answering the challenge whatsoever. It was straightforward for the Los Angeles Rams. McVay was executing whatever he desired. Nacua was performing as he wished. Stafford was operating with complete freedom. It was effortless. They maintained the ability to run the football effectively on early downs with Blake Corum and Kieran Williams, gaining 5 yards, then 4 yards, then 5 again. It was simply easy, methodical progress. It wasn't until Seattle managed to disrupt that ground attack that the situation became slightly more tense. Yet, even during the overtime period, Los Angeles drove the ball downfield and scored a touchdown. Frankly, Stafford missed several throws that could have resulted in even more points. Therefore, that was not a game where you could convincingly argue the Seahawks defense rose to the occasion. You simply cannot make that case. There were moments, certainly, and they contributed to the comeback effort, but I did not conclude that game feeling assured that the Seahawks defense effectively shut down Matthew Stafford. That is not an accurate assessment. It simply is not the reality. The total yardage and additional yards from that game are somewhat tricky to evaluate due to the overtime period, naturally inflating the numbers. This is why the statistics appear greater. However, it is intriguing because Stafford's completion percentage was lower. The points allowed per game are technically slightly under his average. The win-loss record is irrelevant here. Yards per pass attempt, 7.6 versus 7.8. I'm uncertain if that difference is genuinely statistically significant, to be honest. The touchdown to interception ratio across 2 games. What was the other figure? 1.7? Technically, it represents a slightly reduced touchdown rate, but obviously, there were no interceptions. So, there you have it. Stafford performed adequately against the Carolina Panthers. He was quite fortunate that Puka Nacua punched the ball out on what would have been a decisive interception, potentially losing them that game. The Rams organization itself has acknowledged this. It's not merely an opinion. It is literally what Sean McVay has stated publicly. So, that's not necessarily a controversial take. However, the overarching notion that Stafford and the Rams haven't been performing at a high level recently holds little weight for me, precisely because of how we've witnessed the Rams perform against the Seahawks. If they were preparing to face a different opponent, that we haven't observed them play in the last 3, 4, or 5 games, given how those recent contests unfolded, then you could reasonably argue, yeah, you know what? We're not observing the optimal version of Stafford, McVay, and Nacua. Then that perspective would carry more logic, right? I could understand leaning more heavily on their performances against the Atlanta Falcons or the Chicago Bears. I could comprehend that line of thinking. If the Rams were facing the Green Bay Packers in the NFC Championship game right now, I could perceive that argument holding substantially more merit. But similar to how I genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, do not care what the Seattle Seahawks accomplished against the San Francisco 49ers in the playoffs previously, or what their defense managed then, I simply do not care. It signifies nothing to me. It truly does. It is meaningless. And the manner in which Matthew Stafford appeared against the Chicago Bears in sub-zero temperatures, or even against the Carolina Panthers, similarly means nothing to me. When I possess concrete, relevant data regarding how these two specific teams matched up against each other when they directly competed, that is what matters. If this were a matter of medical analysis or any other serious field, you wouldn't dismiss relevant comparative data in favor of unrelated information. You would assert, that's not truly relevant. I only care about how they appear against each other because they are now facing each other again. All other data is essentially irrelevant. I mean, it genuinely is. It has no bearing on the present situation. Attempting to determine if this is the premier pass defense or the finest rushing offense is somewhat immaterial at this juncture, because we possess precise knowledge of what these teams resembled when they confronted one another. Not from last season, not from 2 years ago, not based on how Matthew Stafford typically fares against this specific defensive coordinator or Sean McVay's historical performance against that head coach. None of that is consequential. We're not engaging in statistical manipulation where we examine Patrick Mahomes versus Vic Fangio's defense in Denver and then erroneously assume that has any relevance to Fangio's current role in Philadelphia. That's when analysts attempt to force a narrative that lacks genuine connection. It's the same principle here with assertions like, well, Stafford hasn't been at his best lately. I respond, I don't care about his performance against the Atlanta Falcons in Week 17 or whenever. That doesn't concern me. I am indifferent to how Matthew Stafford looked just last week against Chicago, particularly given the extreme cold, which created a very specific environmental challenge. Perhaps if it were a regular temperate day and I observed Stafford being inaccurate throughout, I could acknowledge, yes, that was a genuinely inaccurate performance. But I still wouldn't necessarily utilize that as a definitive reference point to predict inaccuracy in this upcoming game. Now, if he proceeded to be inaccurate in this game and they lost, you could then retrospectively point to the recent trend and state, well, he had been inaccurate these past few weeks. He hasn't been at his peak recently. That retrospective analysis would then hold more validity. However, I am not convinced you can reliably use that past performance as a predictive tool or form an expectation for what you will witness now. This is especially true when discussing facing a team for the 3rd time, a team against which we already have 2 recent data points. Therefore, the question becomes, Trust the Rams offense or the Seahawks defense more? I believe the trust inherently must reside with the Rams due to their proven pedigree and experience in these moments. You could even argue that you believe the Seahawks defense is superior to the Rams offense. Yet, I don't know how you circumvent the trust factor associated with Stafford, McVay, and the invaluable experience they possess, which carries immense weight. I discussed this previously in a video where I addressed comments. Someone remarked, "Oh, Mike McDonald and the Seahawks defense, they're not going to be affected by the moment. This is just another game." I don't recall the exact phrasing, but the essence was that experience doesn't matter. And I contend, of course it does. In fact, having experience allows you to recognize and comprehend that it does matter. That this is not merely another game. This is the NFC Championship game. Players will approach it differently. There are distinct emotions and elevated stakes involved. To reject that notion is, in itself, evidence of inexperience. Consequently, you simply cannot know with certainty how this relatively inexperienced Seahawks defense will respond to this occasion, whether they will rise to it or not. I do know how Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay respond in these moments. Perhaps you could counter, but what about Puka Nacua? What about the other players? To a degree, yes. However, we have observed Nacua in the playoffs. We have observed other contributors. While there is an entire supporting cast involved, my primary focus regarding the Rams centers on the leadership and proven composure of Stafford and McVay. I've emphasized this before. Ultimately, more than anything, it's about McVay's understanding of how to coach at this level and Stafford's demonstrated history of remaining completely unflustered and undisrupted by the magnitude of the moment. So for me, when we discuss trust, that is where my confidence lies. I've expressed this since midway through the season onward. There is no team I trust more than the Los Angeles Rams. To reiterate, this does not mean I believe they are the absolute best team or that they are destined to win the Super Bowl. But concerning the attribute of trust, reliability in crucial moments, I don't know how you could place greater trust in any other team at this stage than the Los Angeles Rams. This is especially pertinent if we narrow the discussion to offensive trust, not the team holistically. Because when you factor in special teams or defense, the equation changes. But if the question is specifically, do you trust the Rams offense more or the Seahawks defense more? I could theoretically believe the Seahawks possess the NFL's best defense, that they are elite, even an all-time great unit based on their talent and schematic success under Mike McDonald. Yet, you cannot possess the same level of trust in an unproven playoff entity. The absence of that trust does not equate to doubt. They are distinct concepts. Just because I don't extend the same degree of trust does not mean I am casting doubt upon the other side. It is not synonymous. Thus, this matchup is going to be fascinating. That's why I'm so excited for it. And that is ultimately why I believe this clash will be decided between Mike McDonald and Sean McVay when everything concludes. That is the key matchup you should be highlighting. That is the duel we are observing. Not Sam Darnold versus Matthew Stafford. Not a simplistic coordinator comparison. Even these statistical comparisons ultimately signify very little at this point. Comparing the Rams' performance against Seattle versus their other games is largely irrelevant. Honestly, when all is said and done, it just doesn't matter. You are playing the Seahawks again, for the third time. It's the playoffs. It's the NFC Championship game. What will the weather be like? Rainy, cold, warm, breezy. Third matchup. Stakes are monumental. The crowd will be electrifying. I simply do not care what you did in Week 6 against the Indianapolis Colts or in Week 1 against the Houston Texans at this juncture. Even though I have emphasized the data from the Seattle games as the most relevant, which it is, there's also a part of me that wonders, does even that truly matter now? But those are merely my perspectives. I would absolutely adore hearing yours. What do you all think? Who do you trust more? Matthew Stafford and the Los Angeles Rams offense, with McVay at the helm, or the Seattle Seahawks defense? Let me know your thoughts. I read every single comment. So, whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's engage in some discussions. Let's engage in some debates. But ultimately, let's just enjoy the conversation. And please do consider subscribing. We're cultivating an amazing community here, and would absolutely love to see you as part of it. I want to build something that we all generally feel connected to. something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to achieving it. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It genuinely helps with visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so very much.